Salam alaikum, my brothers and sisters. Peace be upon you all, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to tell you about a man you've probably never heard of, but who literally shaped the way you think about the world. This is a story that will absolutely blow your mind. Picture this. You're walking through the sacred halls of the Vatican, standing before one of history's most famous frescoes, Raphael's School of Athens. This masterpiece, painted between 1509 and 1511, brings together all the great philosophers of antiquity in one imaginary space. At the center, you can instantly recognize Plato, pointing upward to the world of ideas, while Aristotle gestures toward the earth, the empirical world. Around them, Socrates debates with his disciples, Euclid traces geometric figures. But look carefully behind Pythagoras, on the right side of the fresco. See that man with bronze skin wearing a turban? The one Raphael chose to immortalize alongside humanity's greatest geniuses? He's not Greek. He's not Roman. He's a 12th century Andalusian Arab named Ibn Rushd, known in the West as Averroes. And trust me, his story is going to change everything you thought you knew about the history of philosophy. Because here's the thing. This man you've never heard of is the reason you can think the way you do today. He's the bridge between ancient wisdom and the Renaissance. He's the guardian of philosophy who saved Aristotle from being lost forever. And ironically, while his own world rejected him, he became the father of European rational thought. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of history's most incredible intellectual adventures. To understand Ibn Rushd, we first need to understand his world. We're talking about 12th century Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. And let me tell you, this wasn't the Dark Ages you might imagine. When Ibn Rushd was born in Córdoba in 1126, this city had nearly 1 million inhabitants, more than Paris and London combined. It housed Europe's largest library with 400,000 volumes, prestigious universities, and revolutionary hospitals for the time. Christians, Muslims, and Jews coexisted in this multicultural society. This was the era of brilliant minds like Ibn Gabirol, Maimonides, and the Great Translation movement from Greek to Arabic to Latin. Al-Andalus was literally the bridge between East and West, between antiquity and the emerging modern world. But here's the catch. Not everything was perfect. When Ibn Rushd was born, the Almoravids ruled Al-Andalus. These Berbers from the Maghreb were much more rigorous than their predecessors. They viewed Greek philosophy and foreign sciences with deep suspicion. Then, in 1147, when Ibn Rushd was just 21, the Almohads overthrew the Almoravids. These new rulers were even more hardline. They preached a return to the pure sources of Islam and considered philosophy downright dangerous. This is the tense context in which Ibn Rushd would wage his battle to save philosophy. Talk about swimming against the current. Abu al-Walid Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Rushd was born in 1126 into a family of respected Maliki jurists. His grandfather was already a renowned Qadi, an Islamic judge, and his father followed the same path. From an early age, Ibn Rushd showed exceptional abilities. He memorized the Quran, mastered Islamic law, learned classical Arabic, but also mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and Greek philosophy. Because you see, despite official suspicion, the works of Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, and Ptolemy still circulated in Al-Andalus. Translated from Greek to Arabic 2 centuries earlier in Baghdad, they found fertile ground in Muslim Spain. Young Ibn Rushd devoured these texts. He discovered Aristotelian logic, Platonic metaphysics, natural sciences. For him, there was absolutely no contradiction between Islamic faith and Greek reason. On the contrary, they complemented each other perfectly. At 25, he became a Qadi like his father and grandfather. But unlike them, he didn't limit himself to law. He also studied medicine. He would become the caliph's personal physician. And most importantly, he embarked on an insane project, commenting on all of Aristotle's works. This wasn't just academic curiosity. Ibn Rushd genuinely believed that philosophy was a religious obligation, fard, for those capable of it. His proof: the Quran itself, which emphasizes rationalism and critical thought. And what is philosophy, he asked, except critical reflection and pure logic? The story I'm about to tell you is reported by Ibn Rushd himself, and it's absolutely fascinating. We're around 1153, Ibn Rushd, then 27 years old, is introduced to the Almohad Caliph Abu Yaqub Yusuf by his friend Ibn Tufail, himself a philosopher and author of the famous Hayy ibn Yaqzan. The Caliph, a cultured man despite his dynasty's official ideology, poses a trap question to the young Qadi. What do you think about the eternity of the world according to the philosophers? This was the burning question of the era. Greek philosophers, especially Aristotle, taught that the world had always existed. But Islam affirms that God created the world ex nihilo, from nothing. How do you reconcile the two? Ibn Rushd, being cautious, initially pretends to ignore the subject. Too dangerous. But when he sees the Caliph openly discussing these philosophical questions with Ibn Tufail, he takes the plunge. What follows is a fascinating discussion that lasts for hours. The Caliph is dazzled by Ibn Rushd's erudition and intellectual finesse. He showers him with gifts, and most importantly, gives him an extraordinary mission: write commentaries on Aristotle to make his philosophy accessible. This moment literally changed the course of Western intellectual history. No exaggeration. Ibn Rushd then embarked on titanic work. For more than 30 years, he would comment on almost all of Aristotle's works: logic, physics, treatises on the soul, metaphysics, ethics, politics. But listen, he wasn't just summarizing. He developed 3 revolutionary types of commentaries: the great commentaries, line by line, word by word analysis, Goldsmith's work for specialists; the middle commentaries, more accessible syntheses explaining Aristotelian thought; the epitomes, simplified versions for the educated general public. This revolutionary method allowed different audiences to access Aristotle according to their level. Ibn Rushd literally invented scientific popularization. But he didn't just comment. He corrected, criticized, developed. When Aristotle was wrong, Ibn Rushd said so. When updates were needed, Ibn Rushd updated. He made the Greek philosopher dialogue with the science of his time. Result: his commentaries became the reference for understanding Aristotle. In Europe, they would respectfully call him the commentator, the Aristotle specialist par excellence. Fun fact: his commentaries were so good that for centuries, Europeans knew Aristotle primarily through Ibn Rushd's eyes. When they said the philosopher, they meant Aristotle. When they said the commentator, they meant Ibn Rushd. That's impact. But Ibn Rushd wasn't just a commentator. He was an original philosopher who developed revolutionary ideas that would shake the intellectual world. The 3 audiences system. Here's his most audacious theory. Ibn Rushd divided humanity into 3 categories based on their capacity to understand truth. The philosophers, demonstrative level. These geniuses can directly access truth through pure logic, rational proofs, scientific demonstration. They need neither metaphors nor symbols. The theologians, dialectical level. They understand through reasoning but need probable arguments and structured debates. They can't directly grasp abstract truths. The people, rhetorical level. They can only understand through images, metaphors, simple stories. This is why religions speak in parables. To illustrate his thought, Ibn Rushd uses a brilliant metaphor. It's like medicine. The chemist knows its exact molecular composition. The doctor knows how it acts on the organism. The patient only sees a liquid to swallow. But all 3 benefit according to their level of understanding. This wasn't elitism, it was educational realism. Ibn Rushd recognized that people have different intellectual capacities, and that truth must be communicated differently to each group. Contrary to what's often said, Ibn Rushd did not advocate the theory of double truth. The idea that something could be true in philosophy and false in religion. No way. For him, truth is one. But it can be expressed in different ways depending on the audience. The Quran uses metaphors for the people. Philosophers use abstract concepts. Same truth, different expressions. This was revolutionary. Ibn Rushd reconciled faith and reason by showing they point to the same truth. He essentially created the intellectual framework that would later allow Thomas Aquinas to do the same thing in Christianity. But here's where the story becomes epic. Because Ibn Rushd was about to wage the philosophical battle of the millennium against Islam's greatest theologian, Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali, 1058–1111, died when Ibn Rushd was born, but his influence was immense. This Persian genius had written The Incoherence of the Philosophers, Tahafut al-Falasifa, a book that completely demolished Aristotelian and Neoplatonic philosophy. For Al-Ghazali, philosophers committed three major errors that led them to heresy. They say the world is eternal, when God created it. They deny that God knows particular details of the world. They reject bodily resurrection. These 3 points were enough, according to Al-Ghazali, to declare philosophers infidels. The impact was devastating. Throughout the Muslim world, Greek philosophy retreated. Courts closed to foreign sciences. It was the beginning of intellectual decline. 60 years later, Ibn Rushd counterattacked with The Incoherence of the Incoherence, Tahafut al-Tahafut, a title that doesn't lack humor. He was going to take Al-Ghazali's arguments point by point. Al-Ghazali: The philosophers say the universe has always existed with God. This is blasphemy. God created the world at a specific moment. Ibn Rushd: You haven't understood. An eternal universe doesn't defy God. It depends on Him eternally. Besides, creating from nothing poses more logical problems than an eternal universe. Even the Quran is ambiguous. It speaks of celestial smoke that existed before the creation of the heavens. Al-Ghazali: These philosophers claim that God only knows universals, not particulars. God wouldn't know what Peter or Paul is doing. Ibn Rushd: You've completely missed their point. We don't deny that God knows everything. We're saying that His way of knowing isn't like ours. Our knowledge is passive. It depends on external objects. God's knowledge is active. It creates reality. God doesn't know the world. He is the knowledge of the world. Al-Ghazali: They deny the resurrection of bodies, pure heresy. Ibn Rushd: Not at all. We all believe in survival after death. We just debate whether it's corporeal or spiritual. Philosophers speak of resurrection of the soul. You speak of resurrection of the body. Why create discord on a point where the Quran itself is metaphorical? The battle was brilliant. Ibn Rushd's arguments were often stronger. But he lost. Al-Ghazali triumphed in Muslim opinion. Aristotelian philosophy definitively retreated in Islamic lands. In 1195, 3 years before his death, Ibn Rushd even saw his books publicly burned in Cordoba. He was exiled, humiliated. The great philosopher died misunderstood in his own world. But here's where the story gets absolutely incredible. While Ibn Rushd was losing his battle in Al-Andalus, his works were crossing the Pyrenees. In Toledo, which had become Christian in 1085, an extraordinary school of translators had developed. Michael Scott, Gerard of Cremona, Hermann the German. These scholars were massively translating from Arabic to Latin. And guess what their favorite texts were? Ibn Rushd's commentaries on Aristotle. The effect was immediate and thunderous. Europe discovered Aristotle through Ibn Rushd's eyes. The emerging universities, Paris, Oxford, Bologna, threw themselves on these texts. Thomas Aquinas, 1225–1274, cites Ibn Rushd hundreds of times. He respectfully calls him the commentator and draws heavily on his methods to reconcile Christian faith with Aristotelian philosophy. Siger of Brabant pushed Averroism so far that the church became concerned. People spoke of Latin Averroism as a philosophical movement in its own right. Dante places Ibn Rushd in his paradise. In the Divine Comedy, the Florentine poet puts the Andalusian philosopher among humanity's noblest spirits. Ibn Rushd's influence crossed centuries. Pico della Mirandola, Marsilio Ficino, all the Renaissance humanists knew his works. And the ultimate symbol? Raphael places him in his school of Athens. Renaissance Europe officially recognizes Ibn Rushd as the man who saved Aristotle from oblivion. Even modern philosophers pay him tribute. Ernest Renan wrote in the 19th century, Ibn Rushd represents one of the noblest attempts the human spirit has ever made. The guy who died forgotten in Marrakesh became the intellectual father of European rationalism. Talk about poetic justice. But why does this story matter to us in 2025? First lesson: truth has no borders. This Andalusian philosopher, rejected by his own people, adopted by Europe, shows us that ideas travel, survive persecution, and always triumph somewhere eventually. Second lesson: faith and reason can coexist. In our era of tensions between science and religion, Ibn Rushd reminds us that you can be both believer and rational. His interpretation methods remain relevant today. Third lesson: the importance of pedagogy. His three-audience system teaches us that you can popularize without betraying. Explaining simply isn't simplifying stupidly. Fourth lesson: intellectual courage. Ibn Rushd risked his career, reputation, and security to defend his ideas. In a world where critical thinking is sometimes threatened, his example inspires. Ibn Rushd today. His Aristotle commentaries are still studied in universities. His methods of interpreting sacred texts inspire progressive theologians. His ideas on education nourish educators. In 1998, UNESCO celebrated the 800th anniversary of his death. Universities bear his name in Morocco and Algeria. Scientific prizes pay him tribute. The man who died in oblivion in Marrakech in 1198 has become a universal symbol of dialogue between civilizations. So the next time you visit the Vatican and admire Raphael's School of Athens, remember that man in the turban, discreetly placed among the giants of thought. Ibn Rushd teaches us that greatness isn't always measured by recognition in one's own time, but by impact on the future. He reminds us that free thought is a permanent struggle, that truth always ends up triumphing, even if it has to cross centuries and continents to find its audience. As he so magnificently said, God created man with his intellect intact so that he may recreate the world anew every day. A lesson of hope and perseverance that still resonates today, don't you think? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to smash that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more forgotten characters who shaped our world. Barak Allahu fikum. May God bless you all, and see you next time for another adventure in the history of ideas.